Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Jeff, Junior Hockey Advisor, and tonight is Junior Hockey Live. As we said last week, we're starting a little bit early tonight because we are in a situation where we're trying to. If that's better, there we go. We're trying to accommodate Mike. Mike will be on in a second or two. He had a game tonight. Game got a little bit late, so I told him I'd start a little bit late. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is looking at the Tier 3 leagues. We're going to compare a little bit of the EHL, USPHL, and the NA3HL. And no slights to any of the leagues. We're not here to try to uh, bash any league or try to take them down. Or all of those leagues have a useful life in hockey. Uh, my opinion, you've heard a lot. I do not believe that there is too much junior hockey. I don't think it's watered down. I think it is resolved annually by people making their choice at the tier 3 level, making their choice by who they choose to play for, and pay for, because there is a lot of money involved with junior hockey. As usual, let us know where you're at, where you're watching from, who you are, and if you got any questions about this, feel free to jump on and send us a message. We'd love to hear what you're thinking and hear your thoughts on this. That'd be very interesting. If it sounds like I'm tap dancing just a little bit, I am. Like I said, Mike's going to be on in a second, and once we get Mike on, we'll get a full roll going. But I can give you a little bit of an assessment of what we're doing. What we did today, we spent a few hours on the phone. Make sure I get my battery pack plugged in all the way. Sometimes that will make problems happen later in the show if the laptop is not charging as it's being used here. What we did today on the phone is that the two of us got together and we basically went through the leagues and we looked at quality of players and how do you judge the quality of players at tier 3 level. Well, not really much difference in the way you judge the quality of players and quality of leagues when it comes to tier 1, tier 2 juniors, BCHL. How do you rank them? You rank them by the output. What's the output? The output is the amount of players that move on to college hockey. For Division 1, for the higher level juniors, Division 1 is used as the metrics. And when you're talking about tier 3 junior hockey, you count the amount of players that are moving on to play Division 3 college hockey. Some of the numbers are pretty surprising. I think we've talked about this before, but the audience has grown so much over the years. We want to make sure that we actually go back and cover these items at least once a year, if not twice a year, because a lot of you miss one broadcast or you pick up in the wrong part of the broadcast, you might miss a lot of information. But let's start out and just look at the leagues themselves. And I want to throw up a screen that just shows the leagues. And as usual, it'll take me a second to get there. Okay. Elite prospects, here you are. I'll throw you up. And okay, here's the elite prospects page. Also, I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go into the page, and I'm going to pull up the EHL first. And for no particular reason other than it starts with an E, and I said EHL, so that's why we went there. So footprint of the EHL, there's the footprint. This is a Northeast League. And what's interesting about this, and I have not tried this, but maybe I can get a footprint that I'll put up, and I'll post this if I have it, of Division 3 college hockey. Division 3, you see the EHL is just basically sitting on the edge of New York, New Jersey. You got a little bit of floating down there, but if you notice, it goes up into New England, and you've got a lot of teams in that area. But it's compact. It's a fairly easy league to travel. It's a fairly easy league to be involved in, and it's an easy league to scout if you're a college hockey coach. So the reason I want to bring this up and talk about it is just to make sure you see the footprint. Down at the south end, you're in Philly. The north end, I think you get all the way up into New Hampshire, maybe even Maine. I think is that Vermont over here? Let's see, New York is there. Yeah, so you get a little bit of exposure up there with the Vermont Lumberjacks. Um, the the league has the real estate advantage in the fight for Tier 3 hockey. Did not talk about the quality of play. Did not talk about the ownership and management. While we're speaking here, it looks like Mike's ready to jump on, so I'll throw Mike on here too. Hey, how you doing?
What's going on?
Well, I've already started and we just finished up, so glad you could finally jump on and participate with us. So
Excellent.
excellent.
So my work here is done.
Your work is always done. Once again, everybody, this is Mike Bloom, Jeff Colson here. This is Junior Hockey Live. Tonight we're looking at Tier 3 hockey and just doing an overview, and especially an overview comparing it with output, so you get an idea of what the output of each of these leagues are. And always we, of course, look at output by the amount of college players that come out. And some people say, that college players is not a good number to gauge it by. Yes, it is. What other? You don't have crossover play. There is as much as some of the groups out there, especially My Hockey Rankings. They do a phenomenal job at youth hockey, but it's so hard to do leagues that don't have crossover play. So any kind of ranking you get on these leagues, it's very difficult. It's very subjective. So, and Mike, I just started off. What we've got up on the screen, or what we had right before you got on, is we had a look at the full Monte of what the league looks like. I'm see if I can get our camera in here too. Oh, I guess not. So we'll just go with the screen itself. We're not in the corner. That sucks.
That's good. No, that's good for them. They don't have to see us finally.
There you go. Is your mic all the way up?
It should be. Is it?
You just sound light, and your numbers are a little light. So maybe pull it closer or talk louder. Do something.
Or both.
Yeah. And folks, I see we got a crowd growing. It's nice to see you all tonight. If you get a chance, please send us a little message. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us maybe who you are, especially if you're using Facebook, because Facebook does not always give us the name of the person. It only says Facebook user. If you're on YouTube, thank you for using YouTube, Twitter, whatever other areas you're participating from. And once again, this is looking at the EHL. So just to kind of explore the EHL a little bit, there's the teams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 19 teams in the league. And how do we get to that number we're talking about? Now, we can go down and scroll and just look at this. This is how they, Worcester is on top of their division. Walpole's at top of their division. New Hampshire Avalanche is on top, and New Jersey 87s are on top of their divisions. So, you've got 4 divisions, 5 teams each, except for one has 4 teams. And this is the league started, and the league started as part of the EJHL for years, and the Empire League. Those are the 2 leagues that were working together. Once that split off, it split off into the majority of the teams at the EJHL level went into what's now the NCDC, and the other teams went into the EHL, and they pretty much took and split the Empire the same way. The Empire, many teams went into the USPHL, which would be now the elite level, and the rest of the teams are now the second tier teams inside of the EHL. A lot of new names, a lot of new fresh faces inside the EHL as far as the teams. So once again, that's the EHL, 19 teams, very, very concentrated in the Northeast. If we compare this to pulling up the NA3HL, we're going to see a little bit different footprint, more of a national footprint. First of all, the amount of teams. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. 9 times 3, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 teams. A much bigger league, and they don't give us the footprint, do they? They
No,
don't
they
give
do
us
on
footprint.
their own site, but not on Elite Prospects.
They do it on their site?
Yeah, on the
Okay.
NA3 site, there's like a footprint.
Yeah, we can jump over there in a second, but you can see it. Oregon, you're in Minnesota, Milwaukee, Peoria, Wausau, St. Louis. That's your central. Your east. Now this would be with some areas that are covered the same way that the EHL are. That's your Northeast Generals. That's your Norwich. That's Danbury, Connecticut. Long Beach is Long Island, I believe. New Jersey Titans and Bay State. So that gives you your East Coast. Frontier, I believe all these are western. Yellowstone, obviously. Great
Yeah.
Falls, Badlands. Those are all your western, and then your south is made up of Texas, Louisiana, New Mexico. Atlanta's in there. I think that's just because it's the
Further south.
yeah they're south too.
That's a
Uh,
long drive.
yeah, that's a commute and a half. And then your west is getting a little bit further out than your Montanas. It's getting out there, but see that west doesn't make sense to me because when you look at that frontier in the west, it looks like
Yeah.
there's some teams that have to drive by each other to play. But that's okay. That's just the way the league is set up. Um, Once again, bigger footprint, 32 teams and 34 teams. I mean, inside of this now. If we go one step further to take a look at the USPHL Premier in size, and this will get more fun, folks. We're going to actually get into some numbers here in a second, but just want to make sure we've got a good understanding. They don't really have.
They got two different sites.
I know. I'll do that again. I'll use Elite Prospects to do it, like I should have in the first place. Mike, this is where you should tap dance when I'm pulling up information.
Well, poor Anthony Noreen. You have his book. Whenever you searched him, you bookmarked your Elite Prospects. So every time you start, his name comes up.
I know. It's been that way
He's a
for a
good
very
guy,
long
though.
time.
So he'll be okay.
He'll understand. Now, here's the big thing. USPHL, now look at the size of the league. So you got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 teams. That's 36 and 36. That's 72 minus 1, 71 teams in one league. So this is a heck of a lot of teams. I don't know what to say about that because, they've got Florida has their own 6-team division. Great Lakes, that's kind of Ohio. But then again, Worcester's in there. I get it. Great Lakes, Toledo, Ohio, Detroit. The Mid-Atlantic kind of says its own thing, but then again, you've got Utica in the Mid-Atlantic, and you've got Hershey and Elmira in Buffalo. So that Mid-Atlantic, they're just clumped together with New York and some of the southern states, the Midwest. Motor City Gamblers are in this, but you've got up in this division, you got the Metro Jets, which are they're about 15 minutes apart. So I don't know if it all makes sense. I'd like to. It's kind of like congressional districts in politics. We live in a town 20 minutes east of Rochester, New York, called Victor. But if you look at the congressional districts there's one district that takes the metro area of Buffalo and the metro area of Rochester, and there's like one road that drives through that road is the connector. And the road is actually part of the boundaries. Both sides of the road, those houses count as part of the district. Anybody else doesn't count, and it's just bizarre. That's the way I kind of look at this league. But tons of teams. Now let's go back and let's talk a little bit about the size and the scope of these leagues. I'm under the contention that you've got some very good owners and operators in all three leagues, but not consistent good in all three leagues. In other words, there's some really good operators in the NA3HL. Your Rochester's up until recently. Your what was it, North Iowa? They
Yeah,
just
North
moved up
Iowa.
two
Yep.
years ago.
Now
North
they have
Iowa was a
Mason.
great one. Dell's been around forever, but they moved over to the Premier League now, USPHL Premier. But my point is, there's good operators. There's good teams to play for. There's good coaches to play for. There's good opportunities in each one of these leagues. What we did today was we broke it down and we took the total amount of players in each league and divided it by the amount of players that are currently rostered that played in that league. So in other words, we went to D3 hockey and we looked at all D3 hockey today. And after we got a handle on how many players were there, we counted the amount of players from the EHL. We counted the amount of players in the NA3HL. We did not do the USPHL Premier, but we'll do that as we go along tonight and kind of walk through that number too. So, Mike, talk about the process that you and I went through this. We spent a few hours on this. Did anything shock you on the numbers?
Yeah, I think we had the commissioner from the EHL on. I think maybe on our second Junior Hockey Live podcast, and he was talking about their biggest focus as a league is to promote their players to NCAA D3. That's what their goal is. And, we even talked about on that podcast that, it's great that they found their niche and they're really playing towards it. But to then see that it actually is playing out that way, it was a little surprising because there's a lot of things at these leagues and in all leagues, from the USHL to the BC to the NA, everybody always says, "Oh, we're the league that does this," and they all have like their little spin that they put on it to
Yep.
try to attract talent. And the fact that what they say they do, they actually do, which is provide that pathway to NCAA D3 hockey. So seeing the numbers when we looked at reverse engineering it, that you always like to say, where we just looked at how many players are playing NCAA Division III hockey right now that also played in the EHL or came from the EHL. And that was a very, very high number. I know we're going to talk about it in more specifics for the amount of total teams that are there.
Yeah.
It's easy when you look at the USPHL. I'm sure their numbers are going to be high, but they got 70 plus teams. So their
Yeah.
numbers should be high.
Yeah. But
And
what you have to do then is you have to kind of ratio it out and say, okay, if you've got, how many teams do we say they're running? 486 teams in that league. I can't remember, but we'll get
70. It was like 72, I think you said.
Yeah, there's just there's a ton of teams there. You would expect their numbers to be higher, but the only fair way to do this is to look at the amount of players that each team is responsible for. It also gives you a little bit better, because there's kids are playing 4 or 5 years. Pandemic, you get that extra year, because there's 4 or 5 years worth of players that are shown. Now you can go back and you can kind of gauge how much impact they're having on D3 hockey with that individual team and the league. So let's get into it. Let's go through the process. Let's kind of show what we did, and I think that'd be much easier. So what we first did is we pulled up Anthony Nornino. Look at this. Now it's not. Now it's not Anthony. Okay, you're still on my screen. Just so you know, the name that popped up was not Anthony that time. It was another
Ty.
person. Ty, yep. Okay, but I got him back because I know you missed him.
I love that he's your starting point.
I don't know how it ever set up that way, but there was a point where I needed his name or needed some information about him. So, okay. So what we did was we started off with NCAA, and then we go 3. It's right there. Boom. We grab that, and this is nothing different than I've shown many of you before on the broadcast. What we're doing now is we're just going through. Now, there's all of your teams. That number is not relevant. You can count them up if you want, but I think it's in the 80s. Isn't it funny? It looks like we're looking at the USPHL Premier.
Yeah, right.
There.
A lot of sun.
Yeah.
So we jump down here to that first green box is, and that's the player stats box. Click on that box, and if you're on the premier level of the or advanced level, whatever they call this at Elite
Premium.
Prospects, what is it?
Premium.
Premium. Okay, so I've got the premium version. You get this search filter that pops up, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to type in EHL, and it'll populate the EHL for me. And what I want to know is I want to know how many players are playing college hockey at the Division III level that funneled through the EHL. And what I find is that number is fairly significant. That number is 504 players, and then there's 48 goalies below that. So you've got a total of 552 players, 552 players that came out of this league. Okay, so now the easy thing to do is just to take their 19 teams and divide 552 by the 19. So while we're doing that, I'll put us back up because it's probably better to look at us than this dead screen. So calculator on, and 552 divided by 19. I did that wrong.
We need like a drum roll.
Yeah, but my numbers aren't the same as they were earlier today.
Well, I think earlier today we knocked out a group of kids that hadn't played any
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Anyway, you get 29.05 is a number. And what is significant about that number is that is the amount of players that each team is responsible for that are playing D3 hockey right now. That's a large number. And even if you divide that number by 5, that means each team each year is responsible for just about 6 players going into D3 hockey per team. That's, of course, there's going to be one team in the league that's got 12, 14. There's going to be one team in the league that's got 4. So, it's not going to be an average of 6. It's going to be an average of 6, but it's going to be not as equally distributed as that.
Yeah, there might be a couple of programs that even have 0, but then there's going to be some that have almost their whole roster.
So 504 forwards, 48 goalies, 552. That's a pretty darn good number for a league of that size. So now let's just jump over and do the same thing with let's do the Premier League. Let's jump in and do that. So now I'll go up here, and instead of I'll put in USPHL Premier in that search engine.
Just make sure you switch the camera back to the screen.
Yeah. Okay, there's our screen. I typed in USPHL Premier. I apply the filter. And we should get some results here in a second. Hit it again just in case. There we go. Okay, now in this league, I'm scrolling down because if I scroll to the bottom, they'll give me a number over here that tells me total players. So they've got a total of 571 plus goalies. And they've got a lot of goalies because they've got a lot of teams. And 57. So at first blush, you think, okay, that's 628 players. But what was it, 72 teams?
Yep, 72.
Okay, so we'll go back up here, get the trusted calculator, which is a cell phone, and I'll go 628 divided by 72, and that number comes out to 8.7. Okay, now the interesting thing about that is that's 8.7 before you divide it by 5 years. Okay, because we divided down to get to the 6, divide that down by 5 years, and you got a number of 1.74. So right now, between these two leagues, it's an average of 6 for the EHL, and it's an average of below 2 at 1.74. Now, if there's ever a league that is going to have a concentration of players, it's this league. You're going to have some of these teams that have really good numbers in the USPHL Premier. And you have to do your homework on which ones and when you're looking at leagues and talking about this. But, you're going to have teams that have never had a D3 or rarely get a D3 commitment in this league too, unlike the EHL, because with 72 teams, your is stratified differently. Your reversion to the mean is not the same. Your statistical, when you look at that arc, it's coming out and it's just stretched way out. And I would just be very careful with the league and doing your homework. It doesn't mean there's not great opportunities there. There's obviously opportunities in the league to play D3. They've got 628 kids playing D3 hockey. The other thing I would do, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but I also want to talk about quality. We're talking about quantity right now, and I want to talk about quality as we get going too. So let's do the last league. Tell us if you like this, folks. Jump on, throw out a comment, yes or no, ask questions. Tell us if this information is interesting or not. I could do this all day. I do. We did. So this is kind of what we do, and I left it raw so we could kind of see how we got through the numbers. So now let's go back and do the last league, and the last league being the NA3HL. Any guesses, Mike, on where the NA3HL is going to end up?
Well, the fact that we did this earlier, I think I could probably hit it right on the nose. But just going back to the USPHL, you made a comment on what to kind of look out for, and just think of a league that has 72 teams in it. The difference between Team 1 and Team 72 is going to be significant.
Yes.
Not only from an ability standpoint, but from where they're able to move their players onto. And with the amount of different locations that those teams are, you just have to keep in mind too, some of those programs, even though it's junior hockey, there's not good midget hockey in that area. So those kids just kind of naturally graduate into junior hockey, but it really is like a midget AA team. So you just got to do your homework on those programs, because there really is good programs in that league. You just have to make sure that's one of the ones you're choosing.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, people want to know how many players are in D3. 2,359 forwards, and I bet you it's a couple hundred goalies. 262 goalies. Okay, that's the numbers we're working on. So you're talking about take my shoe off, carry the 16 divided by 8, and you're talking about 2,621. So what's interesting is if you add up the two different leagues, they're making up 45% of the players before the NA3HL. So where do the rest of the players come from? Any idea where the rest of the players come from?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's going to be players that are playing in the NAL, the NA, that are going to get Division III scholarships or opportunities, I should say. Obviously, the NA3, which you're going to pull up now, but there's kids that are playing in the Canadian junior leagues that we haven't talked about that also could factor into some of that number too.
Yes, you hit it on all fronts, and there are some Division III programs. Very few Division I programs now are heavily laden on Canadian players. It's much more. You get into these Big Ten teams. Some of these Big Ten teams don't have a presence at all, Canadian presence like they used to. It used to be 50, 60, 70% of a team, even 80% of a team would be made up of U.S. players. Now, it's not as prominent in Division I, but you do have some programs in Division III that are really heavily laden Canadian, like the old days with the U.S. Or with the Division I schools. So anyway, let's do the NA3. Let's see what happens with them. So the NA3HL numbers come back up, add the screen. We come on here, we scroll down, and we've got 280 forwards, and we've got 31 goalies. So numbers are much different. We've got 311 players, but remember the size of the league compared to the EHL. NA3 is running 30 teams. What did we say? 29?
32, I think you said.
32?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
It's either 32 or 34.
Yeah, I think it's 34. I think I'm looking at my notes right now. It's 34. So the NA 311 players divided by 34. $914, and then we divide that by the 5. So just a little bit ahead of the USPHL Premier. They've got a 183 versus a 174 per team. So, and once again, because of the number of teams, I think you're going to see more have-not teams and a lot of have teams as far as the amount of players that are going Division 3. So not even close with, and we knew this because we got the same information from the commissioner of the EHL when he came on and talked about it. I'd love to talk to the commissioners of the 2 other leagues and to get some feedback on, is there emphasis on that or not? Now, I think it's only fair. You brought it up. I think it's only fair that we go back and let's throw the null in just to get the numbers of kids that go play, because this will get into the conversation of quantity versus quality. So if we put the null in right now, what are we at? 29 teams in the null?
Sure.
Way to go. Way to be statistically accurate. So look at this. I went in, I put the null in the premium filter, and the null has 701 players that are playing D3 hockey, plus the goalies, which is about 35. So let's say 736 players total. That's for all the 5 years, seniors, juniors, COVID year kids, sophomores, freshmen. So what I say, 735 divided by 29. They've got a 25 number. They're not as high as the EHL, but they're running at a 506. They're clearly the second biggest producer of players to Division 3 hockey. But what's interesting about this, Mike, is nobody ever talks about the Null as being a D3 league, because their numbers are extremely high on the D1 side too.
Right.
But here's the big difference. If I scroll down and look at the kids that are playing from the Null, I'm seeing the Hobarts, I'm seeing the River Falls, I'm seeing Eau Claire, I'm seeing all the quote unquote big boys, Utica, Geneseo, Stevens Point, over and over again. Those are the big ones. You don't see too many of those, the big boys, with a concentration of now the schools I just mentioned, Geneseo. You can get up and talk about Norwich. You can talk about Middlebury, which is a little bit different because they're a NESCAC. But you talk about the Stevens Points. You talk about the Adrians. You're talking about schools that probably have 5 to 8 drop-down Division I players, where they played 1 or 2 years in Division I, weren't getting ice time. Academics weren't what they thought they were going to be. Degrees changed. The intensity of wanting to put the Division I work, whatever the reason is, there's a lot of drop downs that come out of Division I hockey. I'd say most of them is because of ice time, but that's not anywhere near the only reason. I'd say that only makes up half the kids. But those are the quality side of the Division III schools. When you have rosters that are chock full of ex-D1 players and Null players that played 2-3 years in the Null, the quality of those teams are astronomically higher. You can have EHL teams that have a good D3 experience, but you compare that to a team that's got a third of their roster came from Division I, and the rest of it's made up with Null players, and just a sprinkling of EHL or a sprinkling of NA3 or other teams. That changes the whole aspect of the level of play. Is it league by league? No, it's not. These teams, these super teams, are spread out all over the nation at D3. Now, are some leagues stronger than others? Of course. All you got to do is look at who makes it to the finals in hockey all the time, and you're going to see that it's the Geneseos, the Adrians, the Wisconsins, especially the Stevens Points. It's the Norwiches of the world, the Middleburys of the world. Those Uticas. Those are the schools that are always competing, for that top part. Now, the market's changing. There are some other names that are popping up, not as many as you think. But the reason I bring that up is the Null is the second biggest producer of players to Division III hockey, and most people don't consider that.
Right. Yeah, I think you made a couple good points on just the level of team within D3 that the Null is kind of pushing their players in. And then the same can be said when you look at the EHL versus the NA3HL versus the USPHL, the levels of the teams, even though we're taking all of D3 hockey, but there's levels within D3 hockey of the quality of program and things like that. And that's where you're going to see the nuances of the league and who can provide, a better opportunity or, experience for them to get to a higher level program. Just like we talk about the North American League, I think 70% of their league goes Division One. The USHL is like 98%.
Yeah,
While
numbers
the
are pretty
USA,
high.
yeah, even though they're both Division One opportunities, again, you're going to see the layers, the level of D1. The USHL is going to provide kids opportunities to play for Michigan and Minnesota, North Dakota, and Denver, and BC, BU, like all the real big boys, along with the other programs at D1. But you're not going to find too many NA teams that are going to be putting a kid into North Dakota or Minnesota or any of those. It's going to be some of the next layers down is where those players are going to go, which is still great opportunities, but there's levels and layers to each of these different junior leagues and the different college opportunity that you're going to get.
You're absolutely right, and that's important because when you're looking for schools, and this is this is a big area of concern. Look, if we look at just NCAA Division I schools, you've got everything from Ohio State and Michigan that have campuses with 50,000 kids on them. They're huge. Wisconsin, huge. I'm sure I'm missing a few other really huge ones, but these are mega schools. Then you've got St. Lawrence, you got Clarkson, and Union.
St. Cloud.
Yeah, and these are schools with a couple thousand kids, and they're all competing at D1. There's a vast difference. You're going to see a lot of the schools at Division III that are like, for example, the SUNY schools, the WIAC schools, the University of Wisconsin schools. They can have 8 or 10, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 kids. They can be 3 or 4 times bigger than some of the Division I schools. There's only a few mega. I'll get into that in a second. But my point there being, we talked the other day on the other broadcast about the amount of Division I scholarships. Now, when you start looking at quality of play and you look at the quality of player, when you're looking at the matrix, if I'm going to go and have to pay to play Division I hockey, and I've got a really super competitive Division III school that wants me, and their tuition for an out-of-stater is $12,000 total, and the tuition for me as an out-of-stater for some of these other schools that are in the lower echelons of Division I are $40,000, $50,000. So, and that's not including room and board. That's your tuition and books, part of it. So all in, you might be in for $60,000. The difference too is easier to get money at the Division III level. So if I'm looking at a total package of playing complete competitive hockey and having a quality education, especially if I plan on moving on and getting a master's or getting a degree beyond an undergraduate degree, there's a lot of merit to looking at the Division III level of play. Now, you get a full ride to a Division I school, that changes everything. We can set that one aside. I'm talking about, we know that 40% of the players up there pay. they got a lot of guys paying full freight. So if you got to pay full freight, maybe you start looking at these things and going, is it worth it? Is it worth it to burden my family with 40, 60 grand a year for 4 years versus 12 grand? And remember, once you get into the Division III level, you're able to move into some academic scholarship money that's available and grant and aid money that may not be available for a Division I athlete. So it changes the dynamics when you walk into the school and the school says, President Merit Scholarship right off the bat, your $12,000 is now $8,000. Oh, that's pretty significant. So it's just interesting to think about that, and especially when you throw the size in. Just because you're playing D1 doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be on a mega campus. That it's all the things you think about when you think about Division I hockey. You could be in a small town in a very, very remote part of a very cold state. And there's no knock on the Upper Peninsula, but you get in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, you've got 3 schools up there, Michigan Tech, Lake State, and who am I missing?
Northern Michigan.
Northern Michigan. You got 3 schools there, and one of the campuses of the 3 is about the size of a city block. It really is.
I know.
Lake State, it's
up on a hill.
Yeah. Oh, that's Michigan Tech. Michigan Tech's up on the hill.
Yeah.
But Michigan Tech's the same way. Very small campus, very small town. Nice, beautiful. I love it. Used to spend time there as a kid going to camp up there. But boy, oh boy, if you're a player and to get that, now they get good crowds. They got a great rink. It's a good program. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the total experience I'm talking about. The academic and social added to the hockey. You could find things very, very difficult if you're not fully prepared to be in a place that gets 6 feet of snow, that stays on the ground, has a wind that doesn't stop. From November to May, it's wind chills about -30, and if you walk up to the rink, you're walking straight up a hill for about half a mile to get up to the rink. So you could use a car, but sometimes you can't because unless you got an armored tank with metal spikes on the bottom. I know we're getting a little bit off. Go ahead.
I think they actually have snowmobile parking in some of the different buildings up there at Michigan Tech.
Yeah, I love it up there though. But the point being, this is why homework needs to be done when you're looking at schools, especially D3 schools. If you're a D3 bound athlete, and most likely statistically, it's very, very evident. If you are playing in one of the 3 leagues we've talked about tonight, NA3HL, EHL, USPHL Premier, the odds are you're headed to D3 or ACHA club hockey. ACHA is not a discussion tonight. D3 is, there's nothing wrong with that, but no, there's tiers inside of it, just like there's tiers inside of D1. There's tiers inside of the CGHL. Originally we were going to discuss tonight what we were trying to mold and produce tonight's episode was we're going to discuss CGHL and the stratification of levels of plays inside of that, but it kind of brought us back to which junior leagues gives us the best opportunity to play in the Division III level. So the only thing I'd add to that is the NOL players usually go to the D3 kicking and screaming, where the other leagues might be more enthusiastic about going to play Division III. Since the NOL does have such a high number of commitments on the Division I side, you got a lot of kids there that just, that's their last choice, and once they're there, most kids don't complain because they realize they're practicing every day, they're playing in front of good crowds, quality coaching. But quality coaching is another thing to look at. Division III hockey is different from team to team. There are teams that budget for, I think everybody's got a full-time coach right now. I could be wrong, but of all of Division III, you can expect a full-time Division III coach. Probably less than half right now run staffs of Division III with 2 assistants that are paid. You might get one that's half or 3/4 paid. The other one's either volunteer or very little pay. Rarely do you see a Division III team with 2 full-time paid coaches and then having another coach on top of that. So once again, that's the homework part. All Division III and Division I teams, assistant coaches move quickly. It's rare to get a program that they're content to stay as an assistant coach. Very similar to junior hockey, you see a lot of movement there. But the head coach, especially if they're associated with a state school, there's pensions there, there's tenure there. You get some guys that don't plan on ever leaving D3, even if they're good enough, and a lot of them are good enough to be Division I coaches. They latch onto these jobs. I mean, you look at the SUNY schools, and Geneseo's been there for over 10 years. Brockport coach has been there for probably 20 plus years now. You go down into SUNY Fredonia, and Meredith has probably been there now for 25, 30 years. And it's not uncommon because these are state schools. You get into the WIACs, the Wisconsin schools, it's the same way. We can go on the rest of the state schools because they start out at a higher pay. They're part of a unionized big campus because these are all intertwined, and it's a web of schools versus just one college. And once you're in and you're part of the, I don't know if they call it tenure or union at the college coaching level, but you get the point. Once you're in and you're tenured, you get cost of living wages. You get automatic bump ups in salary for years on the job. These are the things that a lot of Division III schools on the private side just don't give. So something to consider as far as your stability as a player moving forward. Mike, you got to talk a little bit. I gotta get some.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a lot for people to wrap their arms around, but these are all the types of discussions and the homework that you have to do, because again, the choice you make to play junior hockey is going to give you the next path that's going to be attainable for you to get to. And if where you're planning to get to or hoping to get to, the team that you're looking at or is interested in you, if they're not providing a pathway to that opportunity, then either you have to find a program that can and does, or you have to reset your own personal expectations, because everybody thinks they're going to be the exception to the rule. Meaning, I'm playing for NA 3HL team, and I'm going to get a scholarship to the University of Michigan. You're not going to be that guy. You're not going to be the first guy that does that unless you all of a sudden make the NA and then a year later you're in the USHL. And even then it may not be possible, but you have to start thinking realistically on where is the opportunity and the odds of getting to the goal that I want to get. And if I'm not there, then recalibrate your goal.
Well, what you said there is pretty interesting because, okay, so I just figured out our chat board is not operating, so I went to the Facebook page, and I'll get to some of these questions here in a second. But you made a good point there. Folks, you can't plan to be in the NUL or the USHL or the BCHL, okay? You can market yourself to those leagues, but you don't really have a choice of where you're going, or unless you're really, really, really good and you're going to be a top pick in the league, then you can pick a team. You can get tender offers and select between 4 or 5 teams that are tendering you. As you're being wined and dined, you can figure out which direction you're going to go. Okay, there's how many kids in those 3 leagues? Hundreds of kids in that league, but there's not thousands of kids in those 3 leagues. And there's 25, 30 kids that fall in that category of really getting a selection of their choice. The rest of them, you hope to get a tender or you hope to get drafted, and it's rare that one comes down the road knocking on your door to draft you or to tender you. If you get 2 or 3 school or junior programs from the NUL that are looking at you, God bless you. You get some choice, but you're not going to have full choice. You're going to have limited choice between the 2 or 3 programs that are looking at you. So you could have 3 programs that are all in the South. You can't say, no, I'd rather play up in the Northeast. Well, you can say no to all 3 of those programs, but then all of a sudden the Northeast schools are going to go, well, I know he was getting courted by those other programs. Is there something wrong? Why didn't he get – Lone Star was looking at him. They're the number 1 team in the league. You turn them down. Wait, what's going on? So you got to be careful with that. Sometimes you got to take what's there and run with it. Yes, you get some choice in the other leagues when you start talking about EHL and when you start talking about NA3HL, because number one, you're paying, and number two, at least in the NAL NA3HL, you get some protections from USA Hockey if you choose to leave a program. It doesn't mean you're going to fiscally come out of it sound, but if you, it's rare that if you say, hey, I really want to be traded at the NA3HL level or at the EHL level, Tier 3 hockey, the Premier, can't speak as much for them since they kind of do everything with not too much transparency there. But if you want to get moved, you can get moved. That's not happening at the NAL. You can ask for a trade, and if they get around to it and they want to trade you, they will. But they don't need to. If the trade has to, it's a business decision, and it has to be advantageous for them. At the NA3HL level or the Tier 3 level, they're going to get their money because you're a paying customer. They're going to get their money regardless because you have a contract and you're obliged to pay so much money throughout the year, and it is prorated, but you're going to get paid. So, all right, you want to talk a little bit about the one of the questions that came in is, where would you rank the NCDC in regards to these leagues? That's a great question. I'll be glad to answer it. So this is a league that sells itself as being a Tier 2 league, and it sells itself as being a league that competes with the North American Hockey League. Okay, we've already given you the numbers on how many how many kids are playing Division III hockey from the NAL, which is substantive. I think we said that number was second highest number of players. It's scribbled down there somewhere. But anyway, you've been on if you're on the podcast, you know what the hell I'm talking about. So I want to show you two different things from the NCDC. I want to show you first, this is Tier 3 hockey and the amount of players they put out at the Tier 3 level, which I'm assuming is going to be substantive. They're putting out 558 plus their goalies. So they're putting out 592. So NCDC, 592 players. Once again, you look at where those players are going. They're in the top third to the middle of the group, but they're not putting players where the NAL is putting players for the most part. Not in the same numbers. They're stratified. They stratify towards the middle. But here's what is really interesting. Let's look at NCAA Division 1, because I think this will tell you a lot about the NCDC. Okay.
Share your screen so we can follow along.
I don't want you to. I'm having
Thank
fun
you.
doing it my way. So now I grab this and I go down to the filter and I put in NCDC. So this is 5 years worth of, roughly 5 years, because there'll be some kids that actually have 6, and that's pandemic related. So now this is total NCDC players playing at the highest level of Division 1 hockey. They're playing Division 1. 119 and 10 goalies, so 129. So let's go up there and put the NAL in, and then we can prorate that by the size of the league. We look at the NAL, 129 for the NCDC, and the NAL has currently 540. Okay, 29 teams in the NAL. How many teams are the NCDC running now? Oh, that's 540 plus goalies. So you've got 32, 42, 52. Oh, geez, they're going to be closer to 600 players. So roughly 600 players for NAL and 100 and change for the NCDC. So that should tell you something about it, and you can prorate it. Null's got 29 teams. Do the math on that. But the interesting thing on this is, let's take this one step further. Let's go over to the USCHO. Great question, because it gets us a chance to really give you an idea how juniors works. If I don't want to go to there. I want to go to College Hockey Inc. Sorry about that, folks. It's late, and it's not my fault we're on late. Whose fault is it, Mike?
My fault. We had a game and we got our asses kicked, so not a good night for our team.
Okay, I am going on to the college commitment section of College Hockey Inc. College Hockey Inc. is a via USA Hockey. This is a grant money from the NHL to tell you how great it is to play college hockey. But what is interesting about this is, if I hit the current team button, what this does now is this breaks down the current team, where these commitments are playing right now. Now, this isn't 100% accurate, because a lot of these kids will commit at a U16 or a U18 team, and they're currently playing in the USHL, or they're currently playing in the NUL. But I want you to look at kids that are freshly committed. First, we'll get to the NUL. This is all USHL. The NUL starts right here, and here's your dates. If I look at the dates, I can see these are all 20, except for one kid at Michigan State, 22 and 23, or 2020, 2023 commitments. That's this year, kids that have committed this year. And I'm not going to give you the number. I'm just going to scroll through. Okay, these are kids, once in a while there's an outlier, a kid that's been around on the roster for a while. But for the most part, these are 2022, 2023 commits. That means this year commits. And I just want you to get a sense of how long that list is. You can go right to this website and do this yourself just by clicking on the current team button. Okay, now that's where the null stops. So the null starts right there, and these are all the teams in the null. And I can tell you the null is a late bloomer when it comes to their picks. In other words, you're going to see a lot of these teams, just explode between now and April. We get 3, 4, 5 more commits. Now there's the BCHL. Don't need to go into that, but I want to get into, there's the Alberta. These are in the order of commits. That's how it sorts. So now we get into Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the Ontario Hockey League. We're still looking for that NCDC, and there it is. The NCDC's list starts right here and ends right there. Okay, those are fresh commits for the last 3 years. This is 21, 22, 23. So you divide that by 3, you're going to find out that there's somewhere between 8 and 12 a year. Okay, big difference in the size of fresh commits. This is kids that are playing in the league that have their commitments right now, and they're not commitments for 4 or 5 years ago. They're commitments from the last 3 years. So I hope that helps answer the question. That was a great question to ask, and thank you for asking that question. Yeah.
Whenever I get that question, I always talk, and condense it a little bit. And it's basically the commitments that these kids typically get when they're 15 and 16, like some of these high-end guys, they commit early. A lot of those kids, if they're out east, are a part of a USPHL program that has an NCDC team. And because they already have their commitment, they just stay locally and they play for the NCDC team. They don't have to go to Texas and Michigan or wherever else to get their commitment. They've already got it. So they stay home, they stay local. It's easier for them. But then within the league, like you pointed out, there's only a handful of other guys that came in uncommitted that will get a Division I commitment from within the league. Whereas on the flip side, the North American League, you have almost no one unless they kind of fell down from the USHL and it trickled down and now they're playing in the North American League that were committed beforehand. Most of those rosters, no one is committed. And then as they play throughout their year, they're, up until their last year of junior hockey eligibility, that's when they get their commitments. So they provide so much more opportunity for the uncommitted kid than the NCDC league does.
So one thing I got to point out, we're looking at the NCDC again. I forgot this website changed its format in the last year. This used to be 100% D1 programs, but now you've actually got to look because the first 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the list for the NCDC is Division III schools because now they've added the commitments there. And if I go down here, Bowdoin, Chatham,
Looks like maybe 10 total
yeah,
kids off this
so
list are
10
D1.
kids. And now if I go back up to the NAL, in all fairness, I got to look to see if that's the same way. It might be that they're only the only ones reporting it that way. But if I look at the NAL list, first of all, most of the kids in the NAL don't commit to D3 until towards the late end of the season. So it would probably not show up. I'm sorry. There we go. So I'm looking at the list right here, and it's pretty.
It looks all D1 so
Yeah,
far.
it looks all D1. So it might be the only league that's reporting that way is the NCDC, and that's just to add some bulk. They need a little fiber on that list because it's. I mean, honestly, why else would they do that? I mean, you're not seeing it inside of you're not seeing it inside the NAL list. We're halfway down the list and you're not seeing it. So I hope that helps. I'm not sure why our interview chat board's not working tonight, folks, but I am going on to our Facebook. So I hope that helps, John, with the questions. I'm not sure what you wanted for D3, but you can see the D3 numbers for the D3 numbers for the NCDC are going to be high, but they're going to come late. They're going to come late in the year, just like any of the other ones. Where would we rank the NCD in regards to these leagues? The NCDC is the top dog of the USPHL Premier because it's the top of the pyramid in that league. They've got the NCDC, then they got Premier, and they've got Elite, and then they've got all their youth programs underneath it. How it compares to the EHL, they still get a fair number for the level they're playing at of Division I players. They'll get like 6 to 12 fresh commits this year. And when I say fresh, that's from August to the end of the year or September to the end of the year. And they've been averaging about 12 a year. Now, where does it stack up against the NA3? It's a better league than the NA3. There's no doubt about it. The NA3 rarely gets a Division I commit. There's no comparison between it and the North American Hockey League because the North American Hockey League is truly the Tier 2 level, has a working relationship with the USHL, with USA Hockey, and they fit in there. The NAL and the BCHL, it's apples and oranges. They play on the same kind of platform, but it's the style of hockey you want. It's how you get there. There's only 100 plus Americans playing in the BCHL. A vast majority, probably 50%, 60% of those are kids that are coming straight from prep and are doing a one and done in the BCHL. That's been that way for years. I'm not sure if you're going to change that. So I hope that helps a little bit, John. And I see that you were pretty much got most of the questions. Talk a little bit so I can look through our list and see if there's any other good questions.
Yeah, I think when you look at the comparisons within leagues, because they're on a completely different platform, and when I say that, there's the USA Hockey ladder of development, which is, the USHL, the NA, and then the NA3. There's significant differences between the bottom team in the USHL and the top team in the NA, and then same thing, the bottom team in the NA compared to the top team in the NA3. When you look at like the NCDC, you could take probably the top 3 for sure programs in the NCDC, maybe 5, could be stretching it a little bit, and they could compete in the NA with pretty much anyone, but for sure the middle of the pack and below, those teams are competing and probably competing for a playoff spot. And then there'll be a drop off between the bottom teams within the NCDC, and you could take some of the top teams in the NA3 and they'll compete with some of the bottom teams in the NCDC as far as like collection of talent on a team and who can win within that game. So because they're on that independent side of just the USPHL, NCDC, then Premier, and EHL, there's not as much of a difference. You can kind of combine the leagues in some cases, but I still think the top of the North American League is going to beat the top of the NCDC. But those top NCDC teams are going to fit right in with kind of the middle of the pack of the NA. And like I said, again, the top NA3 teams, maybe the top 1, 2, or 3 teams could compete for probably a playoff spot in the NCDC, but they're nowhere near the top 3 or to 4 programs in that league. So it's an interesting debate. If you just combine league to league instead of teams within the league, they definitely are like a tier 2.5 league. They're not a tier 3 league.
Yeah.
Junior league.
And we say this all the time, and just to reiterate it, you could take the New Jersey Hitmen, the Boston Junior Bruins, maybe 1 or 2 other teams, and the Hitmen on a good year, they would fit in with the bottom third of the USHL. They're good. That doesn't mean the whole league is playing at that level. And the Hitmen are not always good, but 9 out of 10 seasons they're the best or top of the league, 1 or 2. Boston Junior Bruins have been that way for years. They've got a real advantage. They're both of the ownership group. I think even their father played Division I hockey right there in Boston. They know everybody, and they've got great relationship with the coaches there to house players. So if a kid's playing U18 or he's playing prep, they go, hey, look, you've already got your commitment. Come over and play for us. And they get the college coach to come on board and say the same thing. You can play for the Junior Bruins. You can play there for free, stay close to home, work a part-time job, be ready for school in 2 years, So we're not knocking the individual teams. There's some strength in there. John, I noticed one other thing you said is questions about combines. Last night's broadcast, or excuse me,
Monday night?
Monday night's broadcast. So the Ask Me Anything broadcast from Monday night, I'd strongly suggest looking at that. Folks, we've done over an hour, and I know that when Mike gets talking like that, it's hard to stay awake because he talks and he talks and he talks. And I'm only here for the comic relief and also to keep the ratings up with good looks. So
that's right. Thanks for keeping your foot on this time.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please, if you go to our YouTube pages, make sure you like and subscribe. It really does mean a big difference. It does help when you subscribe to the Junior Hockey discussion group too. We just added some new moderators to the group. We'll roll them out this week, but we're going to have a lot more interaction in the Junior Hockey Advisor discussion group. You can always DM either one of us, Mike Bloom, or you can DM me, Jeff Colson, and discuss things. And I am available for chaos calls. You can set up an hour with me, and we can discuss any of your problems, hockey related. Okay, hockey related. Can't get into any of that goofy stuff. I can't. I'm not a family.
You try, but it doesn't work out.
Yeah. And we're not advisors. Just so you know, we both work in the industry. We are both player development directors in the North American Hockey League. And we tell you that only in full disclosure, so you know if we do show bias, which we try not to, it's probably going to be towards that league. So, Mike, anything else before we wrap it up?
No, I think you knocked it out of the park yet again. So thanks for staying up late with me. I wish I had better news with the performance of my team, but that's just how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, I got to imagine with your generation of coaching, as soon as you were done, you were like, that's okay, everyone.
We get out the juice boxes. Yep.
Did you hand out any participation medals after they lost tonight?
No, but you know what? We played at this rink, and if anyone is listening from the Chicagoland area, I'm not going to say the name of it, but it is a total pit, to the point where our players have to dress in 2 locker rooms because the ones they provide are so small and dingy, and the toilets don't work and everything else. So it's hard to really yell at your team after the game when they're in 2 separate locker rooms. So you either have to bring them all into one and they're all piled up on top of each other, or you got to yell on one locker room and then walk into the other one and yell the same message. So
just get them on a group chat and on FaceTime and just yell at them through the phone on your way home.
Yeah.
So
While I'm driving.
Yeah, you can already be home and take care of business that way. All right, folks, thank you so much. We will see you Monday night. We will do Junior Hockey Advisor, Ask Me Anything. That's when we get into the process more than the teams and the leagues. And then Junior Hockey Live is our Wednesday night podcast. And that is clearly where we talk about the leagues, individual, the players, individual coaches. We talk more about that and less about the process. So hopefully you got a little bit of a understanding tonight. Please leave us some comments on the Junior Hockey Advisor Facebook discussion or on YouTube. We'd love to see your comments. And have a good night, everybody.
Take care, everyone.